Welcome to another episode of Calgary in Depth. This is your host, Dan Kostka. Today, I'm happy to be joined by Jocelyn Hastie. She really embodies the Western spirit and the image of the West in the popular imagination, at least in terms of cowboys and cowgirls and horses and all those wonderful things. And it's a real pleasure to be speaking with her today. Thank you for joining me, Jocelyn.
Oh, I am just delighted to be here with you today, Dan.
I think you're going to offer a great perspective on the West as people commonly imagine it. Can you start by talking a bit about your connection to horses, which are so central to many people's image of Alberta?
Sure, I'd love to. I grew up in the city and was really laser focused on climbing the corporate ladder. I worked at full time as an accountant for an energy company in downtown Calgary and
Mhm.
pursued a certified general accountant designation on nights and weekends. When I was 22, I was promoted to accounts payable supervisor and had a staff of 5, and horses were the farthest thing from my mind. Then I married one of my coworkers, a man who was equally career driven, and we visited his parents at their ranch frequently. The whole family had ridden horses for years, and I found the horses equal parts beautiful and terrifying, quite honestly. I admired them through the ranch house windows, watching them for hours. They looked like magical creatures to me. They were big and strong and powerful, yet skittish, afraid of a plastic bag blowing across the field. I really was as fearful as I was fascinated, and I was nervous when I was on the same side of the fence of them. I was worried they'd kick me or bite me or step on my foot. And the horses there were ranch horses. They were really unsuitable for inexperienced riders anyways. But then one day, my father-in-law brought home a horse for me. Trigger was what we call a bay, a rich mahogany body, his mane and his tail and his legs jet black. And from the moment I saw him, I felt instantly and eternally in love. And I thought, I can learn to ride.
Mhm.
And from that time, horses became my greatest teacher. Since then, I've become passionate about them to dedicate the countless hours required for mastery. And I began my pursuit of becoming a cowgirl, or at least a horsewoman. And it didn't come naturally to me.
What a transition, because like you say, you were working in the corporate world in downtown Calgary, and then you made the move to go south of Calgary, right?
Right. Yes. I really have to say, Dan, that I found my heart and soul in horses and country living.
Mm.
It awakened a part of me that I didn't know was there. My husband, though, or husband at the time, he was quite happy to, when we split up, he purchased a high rise condo in downtown Calgary. So we went very different ways. I, on the other hand, purchased a rundown little acreage, about 20 acres, and invested more in horses. And since then, have bought 120 acres of raw land and built my horse farm on that land.
Right, and this was very deliberate on your part. I understand that you got a job that was south of the city,
That's right.
so that you
Mhm.
could have this very different lifestyle. Can you talk about how much your lifestyle changed when you
Absolutely.
chose to
Yeah.
get this place outside the city? And you're near Blackie, right? Which I believe is just
I'm
under
near
Scarborough
Blackie. Yeah.
southeast. Yeah.
It's east of High River. Yeah. I ended up finding really what was my dream job for many years. I was finance manager at a natural gas processing facility, the Mazeppa gas processing facility,
Mm,
which is 8 minutes from my farm.
mm,
So I worked 4 days a week and could come home at lunch every day. And it was very different working at the gas plant than it was in downtown Calgary. I'd worked downtown for 25 years before I ended up working at the gas plant. And it really was going back in time, probably to the start of my career, in terms of there had never been a woman in a position of authority at the gas plant. And some of the guys were really pretty resentful of it. It took several years for them to realize that I really was there to help them to provide the data and information they needed to make really good operational decisions.
mm.
But by the time the plant closed, I really was accepted as really as one of the guys and part of the leadership team at the
Mm.
gas plant.
And for someone new to the city, like that tends to be when you're new to a city, You focus on the services and the activities, recreational activities, and so on within the city. But talk about the kind of lifestyle you can find if you go just half an hour or an hour outside of Calgary. What's it like out there? And what's your typical day like when you're living near a town of Blackie, which is, I understand, just under 400 folks?
That's right. It's a teeny tiny little town. It's quite interesting now, given how much my life has changed. I find when I go into downtown Calgary, I almost feel physically assaulted
Wow.
by the noise and the number of people. I find myself sometimes if people are walking too slowly in front of me, I cluck under my breath like they're a horse, move along. And much of what I need, I can find either there's really nothing to speak of in Blackie itself, but between Okotoks and High River, I have almost everything I need. So I find I really only go into the city a couple of times a month, but the lifestyle is very different. For example, we have the chuck wagon races and the rodeos in both. Well, the chuck wagon races in High River, rodeos in both High River and Okotoks. And I find the Western lifestyle really has become a part of me, but I haven't left the city behind when it comes to that Western lifestyle because for more than 30 years now, I have manned a booth and horsed a booth at the Calgary Stampede, which sounds kind of funny given what I just said about feeling assaulted with the number of people in the city.
Considering
But
how
the
crowded the
agriculture,
Stampede gets, yes.
right. But the agriculture part of the Stampede is quite different. So the area that I spend almost all my time in is either the barns that are way at the back of the property where the public does not come, or the ag building itself where we have a horse on display, or there's a big tent where we ride the horses, do demonstrations called the Northern Lights Arena, or the Nutrien Western Event Center. So that little corner of Stampede Park is really where I spend those 5 days. I do the first 5 days from Friday to Tuesday, and then someone else takes over from Wednesday to the final Sunday of Stampede.
I'm glad you're mentioning all those different things that the Stampede offers, especially for newcomers, of course. They won't know everything that the Stampede offers, but even for, I think, longtime residents, they might stick to the obvious things, which are, of course, the chuck wagon and rodeo, which get a lot of publicity, and the midway rides are in your face. You can't avoid those, and they're great fun. But there's so much more that Stampede offers, and you're mentioning some of them.
Yeah. And on top of what I've already mentioned, there are also some really interesting Western competitions. For example, team roping and the dogs, the Stock Dog Challenge. And there is cattle penning and all kinds of Western performance type events and competitions. My personal favorite that I love to watch is called the Cowboy Up Challenge. And it's an extreme trail riding competition. It's a race really where the people navigate some really interesting obstacles. And watching the horse and rider combination and how the two of them work together is just fascinating to me.
And can you tell me a little bit more, please, about the Peruvian horses? What's their temperament and appearance like compared to other horses? And what kinds of questions do you get from members of the public who come and see your horses?
The one that always kind of makes me giggle a little is where are Peruvian horses from? Because the answer is Peru.
Yes.
And they are horses, they are descendants of the horses that the conquistadors brought from Spain. So they started coming to North America in the late 1400s. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Starting with the second set of conquistadors that came over, they insisted that there be at least 12 horses on every ship. So our horses are the descendants of the conquistador horses. Now, the Peruvian horses are a little bit different than some of the others. Peru is very much of it is desert country. So the haciendas in Peru are very large. And the Peruvian horses are a fairly small horse. And their real claim to fame is that Peruvian horses are the smoothest riding horse in the world. So there's no bounce when they travel. So you don't see the rider bouncing up and down. Very, very smooth ride.
I don't think you mentioned, did you actually grow up in Alberta?
I did. Well, from the time I moved to Calgary when I was 12, I was born in Winnipeg
Mhm.
and lived there till I was 10, spent 2 years in Saskatchewan, but I've been in Calgary since I was 12.
So you've had a chance to see Calgary and the province evolve in that time. What are some things that stand out to you? How has Southern Alberta changed in that time?
Well, the sheer size of Calgary for sure. When
Hmm.
we first moved here, we lived in Canyon Meadows, and that was deep, deep, deep south at that point in time. And
Hmm.
Midnapore was actually considered a separate town when I moved here in the
Really?
70s.
A separate town?
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a lot of green space around it that's now, of course, all been developed. So it really has changed greatly. The size of it. Deerfoot Trail ended at Glenmore Trail at that point in time. It really has changed dramatically in the years since I came here. And
Right.
Okotoks, too. I think back to Okotoks. When I first traveled to Okotoks, there was only one traffic light in Okotoks. So again, it has really changed.
Yes, and I've been in Calgary, not continuously, but since high school. There are times when, having grown up in a small town, I grew up in Canmore, which was a small town at the time, about 5,000 at the time. It's now grown a lot. But there are times where I just feel the pull of getting away from that, what you were talking about earlier, that being assaulted by the noise and just the amount of people and the hustle and bustle. And
Right.
I wonder if for my kids, if they'd have a better childhood if I was raising them in a small town outside of Calgary. There is that option. And I know you also give people a chance to experience ranch life a bit because you offer ranch retreats. Is that right?
I do, and they're a lot of fun. Really, the retreats are primarily for women to this point in time. I've only had women. But what I try to give them, Dan, is a visceral experience of what it's like to lead something that is much bigger and stronger than you are.
Hmm.
Because once they have experienced that, they can take it into their lives in other places where they may have the opportunity to lead something bigger and stronger than they are.
Hmm.
And the other thing that I really believe the horses have given them is one of the first things I do with them is what I call a mindful grooming exercise, where they spend about 3/4 of an hour just brushing the horse and
Hmm.
really creating a connection. And it's fascinating to see how much more centered and grounded the people get when they're doing nothing but brushing a horse.
Hmm.
Because so often their lives are so busy, they almost never slow down and just feel.
Hmm. Now, living in a rural setting now, do you still feel the need to get away? And where do you like to get away for a change of pace?
Honestly, all summer long, I believe that there is no more beautiful place on earth than southern Alberta in the summertime.
Hmm.
I head west. I love to go out into the Longview area, and indeed, that's where I hold the retreats. I rent a retreat center that is in an absolutely beautiful location with wonderful horses that are retired working cow horses. So these are horses that were competitive in the Western performance arts I was talking about, like team penning or reining or cutting. And it really is a beautiful place. I also really love Bayou Ranch Historic Site. It's something that I recommend for anyone that wants to have some experience of what happened in southern Alberta at the turn of the century and how people lived.
Hmm.
So I like to get out into Kananaskis country, really in the area where the scenery is pretty here in that I see the mountains, but I'm still on relatively flat land, Dan. So
Hmm.
I really appreciate getting into the foothills and into the rugged Rockies. I also do like to pack my horses up in the trailer every once in a while and go for a ride. I particularly like to ride in the Porcupine Hills area down around Claresholm. If someone's interested in that kind of thing, a wonderful place that I know of is Home Place Ranch that is right around Pritis, and they offer trail rides for families. So that might be something that your listeners might want to check out as well.
Mhm. We're talking so much again about these things that fit the image of the West. How well do you think Calgary has done or Alberta has done in terms of holding on to that Western spirit and people being aware of the ranch culture and horse culture and that kind of lifestyle?
I do believe that Calgary has done an awesome job of that. The Stampede is like nothing else. It is one of the richest rodeos in the world, but there is definitely something to be said about the smaller town rodeos. I'm talking Okotoks, High River, even Ponoka, that kind of thing, Strathmore. The beauty of the small town rodeos is you get really close to the action. Very often the bleachers are right against the fence and things are happening much closer to you. And I think that in Calgary, because of the Stampede, people do have an awareness of Western heritage and Western culture, but I think it gets closer and more intimate and more personal in the smaller town rodeos.
Mm.
One of my personal favorites I'll talk about is Little Britches Rodeo in High River, because that is for farm families, ranch families, and it starts with things. There will be 4-year-olds that'll go mutton busting. So they'll actually put a harness around a sheep, and the kid hangs onto the harness and tries not to fall off the sheep. The other
Yeah.
place that there's that kind of thing is Millerville. There's the Millerville Fair. It's usually the July long weekend, and that's another one where people can really experience Western heritage and the agricultural lifestyle.
Wonderful. Well, you've given us so many examples, and I think your own example of moving from a corporate job and living in the urban setting to a ranch or farm type setting is very inspiring. And it's just the kind of change I think a lot of people could use. If they don't actually move themselves outside the city, they can at least, on the weekends and in the summer, explore all of these wonderful places you've described.
Yeah, the other horseback riding place, Home Place Ranch, is I'm very fond of Mac that runs it. There's also Anchor D Outfitting. So there are a few different places around Calgary where you can experience it. And there really is something magical about being out in nature on the back of a horse.
Can you talk about that? And are there certain times that stand out in your memory when you just thought, wow, this is the life?
This is heaven. There have been a few times, both here in southern Alberta, and also I've done quite a bit of long distance riding in Peru, and in particular in the Andes Mountains.
Oh, wow.
And there's a trail company in Peru called Peril Chico that is just outstanding. It actually is one of National Geographic's top trail rides in the world. And there are times when you're on a fairly narrow, it's not for the faint-hearted. You're on a fairly narrow trail, maybe 10 feet wide, and there's a 3,000-foot drop off.
Hmm.
So just to experience that and to be places where almost no one else goes, to hear the birds and feel the breeze and just experience all of nature in a very different way with no motors. Perhaps you hear the sound of the horses chewing their hay nearby. It really is something magical. And I can't remember, it was one of the US presidents that said, the outside of a horse is good for the inside of a man.
I wonder if that might be Theodore Roosevelt because he was
It
famous.
was, it was,
Yeah,
it was. Thank
yeah,
you for
yeah.
knowing that.
Yeah, that's a great quote. And I wonder if you're on a horse and there's a 3,000-foot drop, what's the level of trust you have to have? And does that just come naturally to you that you would trust a horse to not do something that would put you in danger?
Well, and horses do sometimes make mistakes, but those particular horses, they have done that trail twice a month, many of them for years. Many of the very best trail horses are in their late teens. They've been around a lot, they've seen a lot, they've done a lot. And when we get the heck out of the way of a horse like that and let them take care of us, it is something pretty magical. Most of the time with horses like that, if someone gets into trouble, it's because they have tried too hard to control the horse.
Well, Jocelyn, I really appreciate you taking some time it's really eye-opening to think of all the things that you can do to connect with Western heritage and to get out of the city and how horses can play such a central role in that. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective.
I am very glad to have done it, and I hope that you guys will get out and nuzzle a muzzle sometime soon.
I'll add it to my to-do list for this summer. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Wonderful talking to you.
Wonderful talking to you. Thanks very much, Dan.